So it's a beautiful sunny afternoon here in Tel Aviv, and just a day or two before we get into the notorious hot and muggy summer of Israel. And I'm pleasure to host my good friend Ori Warshavsky from PolyPid, and well, let's just jump right into it.
By the way, I'm jealous of your weather in Tel Aviv because it's end of May and I'm wearing a sweatshirt here in New Jersey, so it's cold.
Yeah, well, I mean, the weather is good. You know what it's like. The weather here is good for like about 6 weeks, and then
And
some
then it,
towards the end of May, and then it starts ramping up.
yes, yes.
So PolyPid has been around for a while, and and they're pioneering really a smarter way to deliver medication directly to surgical sites. But I'm going to let Ori tell the story. You guys were funded back in 2008. That's a long, long journey. Maybe not atypical, but so what's new and wonderful for you guys today, and what's different from when you started?
It's actually so yes, we started in 2008 and we are this close to we almost can see the end in a way. We are weeks away from top line results of a pivotal phase 3 study and which will be sufficient for FDA submission. So all this work for so many years and the different kind of life cycles of the company and private and public and failing a trial and all that is coming to a head in the very, very near future. So we are super excited.
So I bet you are. So now you feel that the long bet is now going to pay off.
Yes, yes. All the
Amazing.
all the long nights and yeah.
So I took a look at the website and on clinicaltrials.gov earlier today, and I saw 5 programs in the pipeline, and two are in phase 3, not only one. So you're getting close, as you said. So what's your focus right now?
Yeah, so maybe a word on what Polypid is and what we do, and then I can kind of explain how it goes. We have a delivery platform that can take really many types of APIs from antibiotics and small molecules all the way to large peptides and antibodies and turn them into a local high concentration prolonged release. And what's unique about what we do is when most companies talk about local prolonged release, they talk about 72 hours or 96 hours of sustained release. We really talk in days and weeks and even months of steady linear release, meaning the same amount is released through the entire duration, again, all the way to several weeks of release. So something that's really unique in this space. And our phase 3 product is looking into a problem that really hasn't had much innovation in many years, and that's surgical site infections, meaning an infection that happened post major surgery. So a patient comes into the hospital for a joint replacement or for an abdominal procedure or breast reconstruction, C-section. The procedure went well, and then an infection, the incision got infected, and now the hospital needs to deal with this infection. And this infection can mean more days in the hospital and more surgery time and readmission and so on. So our product really gives a local antibiotic delivery at the incision, meaning you don't have to get a systemic antibiotic either orally or IV. It's really where it's needed locally at the incision. It's releasing antibiotics over 30 days and really gives an umbrella protection or another layer of protection against these hospital-acquired infections. And in previous trial, we showed over 50% reduction in infections with very low p-value. So everyone's really kind of excited about what's coming from the current trial.
That's actually amazing, and I think you say it so well because I looked at the website, and actually I think the first time I looked at the website I wasn't really sure I understood what you do, but now yeah. So it's most It's mostly infection control and reducing system exposure, correct?
Right. This is our starting point. It's infection prevention. It's really, we'd like to see this as our first step because the platform can do so much more, and we can talk about this later, but we can do if you think of today, chemotherapy is injected systemically, meaning you're getting an IV or you're getting an pill, and basically the entire body is impacted by the chemotherapy, as opposed to what we can do is inject directly to the tumor chemotherapy, have it high concentration in the tumor for a long period of time, again, without all the kind of the impact, the systemic impact that chemotherapy did. So we have an early program there. We have some collaborations. There's quite a lot that can be done. Once we get that first step, that foot in the door, we'll have a lot to do.
No, I'm sure you will, and it sounds like an exciting place to be. You obviously create a tremendous amount of value for patients and indirectly for hospitals as well, because they don't have to deal with or maybe deal less with readmissions. But I was sort of questioning in my mind, how do you capture value for something like this? So how do you capture value commercially?
Yeah.
Especially in
So
a market like hospital surgery or orthopedics where adoption could be slow.
yeah, yeah. So I'll try to answer it in a few ways. First, before the commercially, I think clinically it's clear, right? If you can prevent 50% of infections, it's the benefit for patient is clear. I haven't met the surgeon who told me this is not relevant for me. Every surgeon knows the risk of a surgical site infection. They all are more or less aware of their infection rates. And on top of that, and that kind of relates to the economic piece, the hospitals get measured regularly on their infection rate. They track the department infection rate, they benchmark departments to one another. They have to report, this is all public information. They have to report it to state health authorities and federal health authorities, their infection rates. And they get penalized for, so the worst offenders on infection rate, kind of the bottom 25%, get penalized on their Medicare reimbursement if they're below a certain infection rate. So when we think of adoption in the hospital, it's of course the clinical story and finding the champions in the hospital that can bring this into the hospital, but there's a pharmacoeconomic story that's just as important here. And we know from literature, from other people's research, that in surgical site infection in a soft tissue, in the kind of abdominal procedures and whatnot, can cost the hospital about $25,000 per patient. An infection in a joint replacement, in a hip replacement, knee replacement, those are rare or less frequent. But if there is an infection, this can mean 4 or 5 weeks in the hospital, multiple procedures. Research shows between $70,000 to $100,000 of cost to the hospital. And I specifically say the hospital because it's hospital acquired infection. The insurer said this is your problem. It caused it. It happened on your watch. I'm not paying for this. You have to pay for this. So the hospital is completely on the hook for the treatment, to getting rid of the infection and making the patient whole again. So really, our conversation on adoption, on use, on value is between us and the hospital, and not less us and the insurer. So that's kind of where the value drivers are. But you're right, hospital programs, it's not as easy as selling to CVS. It's a much complicated process. There are P&T committees involved. You have to get on formulary. They most likely the hospitals will want to pilot and test the program before you get the broader adoption. And we recognize this, and we recognize that we are a small startup from Israel trying to kind of make our way into this complicated the hospital space. And we took the decision a couple of years ago not to launch this on our own, but to find partners that know their way around the hospital, right? They know how to talk to surgeons. They know how to talk to the infectious disease specialists. They know how to get products on the formulary. Um, so, and these are conversations that are ongoing, and we just kind of disclosed this last week that we are in discussions with a few potential partners. Companies are going through due diligence already. I'm sure there'll be more that they will join into the process once we have a top line results. But we're looking for a specific kind of profile of a partner. So in a way, two buckets. One is the hospital anti-infective companies. That's one bucket because again they know the conversation with the antimicrobial stewardship committees and the in IDs. And the other group, which maybe not as straightforward but can be even more relevant for us, is some of the big med device companies, the Medtronics, the J&J, Becton Dickinson. They are in every operating room in the US. They talk to all surgeons. They sell anywhere from MRI machines to syringes. They have infection prevention units. They sell mesh for hernia, and so
Yeah, no,
that
it's clear.
it really is a good fit. It really is a good fit for what we need, and I think this is and they know this space more than anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a presentation a few years ago of someone who runs the Medtronic hospital device division. So they actually are outsourced to build complete, wings and operating rooms. So they're like like a general contractor for hospitals that
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
and they bring
yeah,
everything to the table. So I could
yeah,
see how that division would be a really great partner to have.
yeah. Yeah, what's nice with our product is it really, some doctors called it intuitive. It really doesn't take much training and much change in how surgeons do their how they close the incision today. Which again, even for a device company, for them to now work with a pharmaceutical is relatively easy to train them and for them to train the surgeons. So I think there's a nice synergy here.
Yeah, because it's a delivery system, and you're not actually treating people. I mean, you're preventing something.
It's prevention, correct. Yeah.
So, what are your next three wins?
Our next three wins. So first, data is coming soon. That's kind of everything is dependent on that, right? So the data will come in mid to end of June. And then we expect to meet the FDA before the end of the year for a pre-NDA meeting and file beginning of next year. So that's kind of win number one, and everything else is dependent on that. Second, as we get the data, like I mentioned, we'll see a few more companies. I know that companies are on the sideline waiting to start the discussion about the commercialization. So ideally, we had some sort of a bidding process between a few interested parties. I'd like to announce before the end of the year an agreement because that, first you need some time to prepare for launch, but also I think it's a good signal to the market that about the value potential of the product. And the third piece is, we need to see what else can we do with this product? So one is the pipeline, which we briefly spoke about, but also how do we expand the indication for our current product for Dplex? I don't know if I don't think I mentioned this, but we look at overall addressable market for this product is close to 12 million procedures in the US. If you
Well,
take all the kind of colorectal resection, hernia procedures, hysterectomies, C-sections alone is 1 million procedures a year in the US. And then add to that, there are joint replacement and spinal fusions and trauma. There's quite a lot. Not all of it is available for us at day one. The current trial is looking at colorectal resection. So this is our starting point. This is the foot in the door. But we have a label expansion plan, which will, take a few years to develop. So this is kind of the next win to expand. What's the next trial? What's the next population to bring under this umbrella?
that's really interesting because I think that I think colorectal is like a 10 billion. No, I'm sorry, it's like a 27 or $28 billion market. So it's a huge market. I come from the clinical trial space, and I saw that actually it's interesting that in at least in clinical trials, colorectal, like I think even though there's no lack of patients, recruitment is still a big issue. That's not your problem. But what was more interesting in the stat was that 60% is just business reasons. And the business reasons may be that maybe the drug doesn't work or
Mhm.
doesn't work well enough. And it could be that you guys could be a tremendous force multiplier
Yeah.
for oncology drugs and colorectal cancer. Is that true, or is that just me
So,
making it up?
so So we the reason why we picked colorectal is because, if you think of infection, the colon is the dirtiest organ in a way, right? The risk of infections come from the outside and from the inside.
Yes.
Uh, what we and to your point, if there is an infection, this really has a downstream effect on any post-surgery oncology treatment, right? So if the patient is now another 10 days in the hospital and take time to recover, you have delay in the next the chemo plans after, right? So all that is delayed, all that is impacted. So if we can prevent this, if we can prevent the infection, we can get patient quicker into whatever other treatment they're going through. We see this quite recently, quite significantly, and we just had a recent conversation with a uh, chief of surgery at Beth Israel that looks at breast augmentation after mastectomy, which and apparently they have real big issue with infections. So a woman diagnosed with breast cancer goes to mastectomy. There's the reconstruction, either with an implant or a spacer. They have between 20 to 30% infection rates, meaning one in every three women there's an infection. She needs to come back to the operating room. Likely, she goes under surgery again to take out the implant. That can delay the follow-on on oncology treatment by 8 to 10 weeks after that. So there's quite a big impact downstream from having an infection. So this is another space where we see quite a large need. There's something around 150,000 breast reconstruction for oncologist patients in the US. So not a small market with really high need for something like this.
Sounds to me like you guys should be building the factory already. Uh,
So we actually do have our we this was another decision. So when you talked about it, we were going through this since 2008 and the different developments in the company. Probably, I think 5 or 7 years ago, we decided that strategically it makes sense for us to build our own manufacturing suite, just because a lot of the know-how, a lot of this how this delivery system works, is the manufacturing know-how. So instead of relying on CMOs, and even if we took a CMO, we probably had to bring all the equipment and teach them how to do this manufacturing. So we decided we have our own manufacturing suite in Israel, in Petah Tikva. It's a full sterile process. It's full GMP. It went through European inspection recently. So we are, again, all the different pieces that need to happen ahead of NDA submission are kind of falling into place now.
it sounds like excellent placement, which is sort of um, maybe an entree to my next question, which is if you could remove one constraint right now, just one constraint, what would it be?
One constraint. Wow, that's I mean, the biggest unknown is, well, is right, the whole NDA review and approval process, right? If I can miraculously jump over that and go straight to approval, I think that that will bring a few years back to my life, and maybe a few more hairs in the, because this is, in a sense, we already recruited the last patient to the trial. So, it says that piece is not over, but it's at the final stages. But really, all eyes in the company are now on preparing for the NDA submission, the clinical team, the regulatory team, our manufacturing team, getting ready with inspections, getting ready for FDA inspection. So everyone is looking into the NDA submission and the NDA review process. Even from a commercial perspective, we're looking at, how do we position this? What will be the label negotiations with the FDA? If we, by some miracle, can, can jump that piece, that will free up a lot of capacity to do other things.
Well, I mean, it's a huge for anyone,
And it's
really.
part of the game, right? It's part of the,
Exactly. It's the
yeah,
huge, the big known unknown. You know, you have
yeah,
the unknown. You don't know what it's
yeah,
going to be. But you
yeah.
must have some, I mean, your regulatory consultants, what are they telling you? What's their feeling? They feel good on the bet?
Yeah, so obviously we're all blinded for the data it is, but what we know is we know a few things. First of all, this trial is a repeat of a subpopulation of a previous trial, and in that subpopulation, the product worked really well. Like I said, the 54% reduction in infection, very low p-value. So that's kind of step one. Second, we had an interim analysis end of last year at 400 patients. The trial itself is 800 patients. At 400, we had an interim, which, of course, again, we remain blinded, but an independent committee looked at the data in an unblinded way. And the committee had basically their scope was double. One is to look at safety, make sure there's no safety issues, and that is checked. They already said in writing no safety issues. The second scope for them was to right size the trial for kind of the highest probability of success. And based on the statistical plan, they could have sent us to anywhere from 800 patients to 1100 patients. So the fact that they sent us to the kind of the first stop, the earlier stop, means one, they saw efficacy, meaning any risk of futility in the trial is taken off the table. And two, the fact that it's the earlier stop means for us that the product works well. Again, we can only guess, we can make some assumptions based on the statistical plan, but it's if we're looking for something to hang on to in the next few weeks until the results, this is it.
Oh, this is your time, actually.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Definitely your time. Um, well, you guys are in the last mile of this journey, and it sounds really, really great. I have to say that I just had this aha moment with the colorectal a few minutes ago when we were talking about that. I didn't really think about that, but I remember that 60% of these colorectal therapeutics are don't really make it to market. And I think
Yeah.
and it's like mostly business reasons, okay? And
Hmm.
business
Hmm.
reasons that it doesn't work well enough, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the commercial side can totally not be misunderestimated here. I know that everyone in the industry is like, focused on recruitment, but between you and me, finding patients for this kind of an indication is easy, okay? But getting it to work in the field could be really hugely difficult. And it seems to me, I mean, this was my own aha moment for talking to you, was that, wait a minute, these guys can take an important field like that where 60% of the therapeutics just fizzle out, and they can maybe improve the bet, like, you know,
Yeah.
by 50%, right? And that's like huge, huge,
Yeah.
huge commercial opportunity. Sounds to me like I should be buying shares in your company next week. Or maybe we need another one because the Bitcoin just went over 106 today. So
There you go. There you go.
and Nvidia has another announcement in the cloud. So people are looking at that kind of stuff. They're not looking at the important things like keeping patients safe after a breast reconstruction.
Yeah, well, we're not in the same scale of Nvidia yet, but
Well, you're
the goal in the end, we all joking aside, is really to build a kind of an Israeli pharmaceutical company, right? We're really not looking to. It's not a flip. We're not looking to sell. We want to build something sustainable, build a pipeline, we'll partner this one product which will kind of inject some cash and cash flow into the company that we can do more. We can do more in oncology. We can do more in everywhere that needs a kind of a local approach that today you're going systemically because that's what it is. You can think of a kind of local steroids for tennis elbows or frozen shoulder, or there's a lot that can be done. We just kind of need to start and build a pipeline.
I think, and this was another aha moment that I had myself a week ago when I was just thinking about writing for my newsletter, and it occurred to me that actually when you're dependent on external factors like externalities, right? Banks, governments, big institutions, it never works right. Okay, it never works right. So what does work? Local. When you go local, when it's local people, local physicians, local communities, that works really right. And there's sort of like an analogy here. There's kind of like an analogy here by you could say, well, I could go by the institution, the hospital, the system, procedures. I could do all that kind of stuff, which is like institutionalizing this thing. Or you can say, let's just go local and I'll fix it locally, and that totally fits in with that philosophy.
I'll tell you another layer to this local to your analogy. So our product, one vial has 50 milligrams of antibiotics, 54 milligrams of antibiotic, released over 30 days. If you think of going systemically, going right to the institutions, if you have an infection and you go to the doctor, usually a doctor will give you 100 milligrams 2 times a week, 2 times a day, insist on finishing the 10-day course. So you take about 2,000 milligrams of antibiotics. And that has impact on microbiome and toxicity to the kidneys and so on. So this is 2,000 milligrams over 10 days versus 54 milligrams over 30 days, which can do much more because it's local and it stays there and it kind of works exactly where it's needed without all kind of the dilution in the system, in the body, in the bloodstream.
So that seems to prove, even though it's kind of like a philosophical analogy.
Yeah. No, but I like that. I like that.
But local always beats external. Always beats external.
Yeah.
Biology, organizations, governments, big systems, local always beats. And I think that's sort of something we can all take away from this conversation today. You're working locally, 50 versus 2,000. Wow, it's a big deal. So it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you.
And I know it's been a long journey, but I have a really good feeling about this. I'm sure you guys do as well. And so here's what's going to happen. We're going to edit it, and then I'll send you the link when we go live. Let me just finish off right there. And thank you so much. Ori Warshavsky is leading PolyPid into the final mile of a long biotech journey and possibly changing how we manage post-surgical care infection management. And you can learn more at polypid.com. And if you love this conversation, don't forget to subscribe and share Life Sciences Today with a friend who's thinking about product market fit in healthcare. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
So did I. I had a great time.